There's a lot of good art in the rap and hip hop world. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I would just like to highlight that I brought a laser pointer. Well, I didn't bring it, but I guess the church actually had one downstairs. I was like, does anybody know if we have a laser pointer? Because the screen is so far away. Like, I actually do want to like point at stuff. But these were like a big hit, I think, in like the late 90s. I don't know. I feel like everybody in my like seventh grade class was like getting in trouble for these. Or like play with, I don't know, you like played with your cat with them. Yeah. Well, hey, it is, I believe it's spring break, so it's a tight crew here tonight, which is super fun. Welcome. If you haven't met me, I'm Brian. My wife, Lisa, who I think just took our little Lucy, our 13-month-old, up to the nursery. We are new to town and new on staff here at the Durango Vineyard, and we are really, really excited to be here and get to know all of you. We haven't been super pumped on the weather so far, right? Can we just have a commiserating moment? I'm sure there are people in this town that are like, can we just stop talking about the weather just because even just bringing it up bums me out? We always joke, there's Lisa. You can say hi. So I'm going to tell you a little bit. I guess sort of last week I talked a little bit about kind of our story and kind of where we grew up and how we moved to Colorado in 2009 and then landed here in the last month. And but one of the things I didn't really talk about was my sort of full-time job outside of being here at the Vineyard is actually working with pro athletes, professional cyclists actually, as basically as like a chaplain. And I was actually talking with someone the other day about if you want to confuse someone about your job, tell them you're a chaplain. They're like, what is that? What I've never even heard. I mean, people have said like, I don't even know what that word means. But basically what it is it's somebody who kind of just journeys with athletes or with, there's hospital chaplains, there's military chaplains, there's all different sort of versions, but really to provide mental, emotional, and spiritual support for whoever the people that they're serving. And so I basically have gotten to do that for the last 8 years in the sport of pro cycling. And so we started, the ministry more or less started in 2012 in professional road cycling. So think sort of Tour de France level stuff. So world tour, I don't know if you're familiar with any sort of the language in that world, but sort of top tier European racing down to continental and professional and even amateur racing here in the United States. And then it morphed into not just working with road athletes, but actually our Olympic team, our mountain bike national team, mountain biking athletes, gravel athletes. We have people and relationships on the track. So all the different sort of disciplines. I actually worked with a guy who was on our BMX national team for a while. This thing just fell out. Okay, let's start over with that. Anyway, so it's been awesome. But we joke about how if you're an endurance athlete, or like many of you here spend a lot of time outside, you're sort of a part-time meteorologist as well, because you spend so much time looking at the weather graphs and everything. The first time we rolled into Durango to meet DJ and Vanessa last September, we were talking about fishing on the San Juan, we were fishing the Animas, and he started talking about the turbidity of the water and about the fall rate of the rain, and I was like, these are my kind of people, right? They're nerding out on graphs on the website and everything, and anyway, I don't know if that's you, but I get pretty nerdy about the weather, but anyway, and so for the last 8 years, I've gotten to support and be around and cultivate spiritual community with these top-level athletes. And I had a history racing here in the U.S. for competitively in some way at a sort of an elite level for 7 to 8 years. Actually, a racing buddy of mine, Brad, is here tonight. This guy used to just like try to hold his wheel any race I was in. He was a machine. But in that work, I don't think I've found a group of people more committed to productivity, efficiency, a group of people more driven by results, right? Like goal-oriented people, right? Like I want to get from point A to point B as fast as I can, right? And I will do make all the controls in my life to make that happen, right? So diet and training and sleep, and I'm going to actually kind of manipulate and control all these different things to like make all the, we call them like marginal gains, right? Like you can kind of get to like 95% of what everybody else is with some hard work, but it's that last few percent, right? That takes so much work to get. But really what ends up happening over time, and there's been so many articles and books, and I'm sure you've heard interviews on ESPN, and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and those guys get kind of dogged on a little bit for some of this stuff. But if you live your life in such a way where you are so focused on goals or so focused on production or that version of success, actually what ends up happening is you live a pretty bummed out life, because winning actually doesn't happen that much in professional cycling, right? How many Lombardi trophies is the Lombardi trophy the Super Bowl trophy actually? Lombardi trophy. How many Lombardi trophies does Aaron Rodgers have? Right? Like one of the best quarterbacks in the world that's ever lived and has never won a Super Bowl. Right? The guy can't play in the playoffs, which really bums out my really good buddy Kit, because he's absolutely obsessed with the Packers. But the Jets. Yeah, he got traded to the Jets. Spoilers. And so really what ends up happening is really there's a point where athletes get to this turning place, right? Where they've done the grind long enough, they've had their heart set on this thing, and they haven't found the success that they're looking for, or they have, and they realize that actually the success that I get in sport actually really doesn't fill me in the way that I thought it would. A good buddy of mine won an Olympic medal at the Olympics a handful of years ago, and he wore that thing around and just like, love. I mean, have you felt those things? They're so heavy. They're like pure, just this big hunk of metal. He wore it around and, did his like kind of celebration tour and everything. And it was amazing. I was super happy for him. But a couple months after that, I actually asked him, I said, dude, what, just shoot me straight here. How long did the high of having that medal last? I'm just curious. Like, never had a friend win an Olympic medal before. So like how long did it really last? When did he said 2 weeks. 2 weeks for an Olympic medal. I mean, literally things that this is not a fake story. Like this guy would vouch if he was here. 2 weeks for a lifetime's worth of work. Right? And so there's a point where athletes either get what they're trying to achieve, and they realize, man, like the success is short-lived. Like maybe standing on the top step of the podium, right? Maybe even nailing that job that you've been wanting, getting through that season of parenting, right? Like working through that hard, or like finally working through that hard relationship or something. Maybe just getting from point A to point B isn't really what brings me joy. And this sort of may seem obvious, right? Like there's all sorts of cliche statements about stuff like this, but it's so true. Like we are and this isn't just with athletes, this is just us in general. Like we are a people who are absolutely obsessed with productivity and efficiency, right? Like I don't want to deal with the hard things. I want this over now. Make it happen faster, right? Amazon Prime, like get it to my door. I need it today. I don't think there's same-day delivery here, though. Yeah, no, there's not. Yeah, it was Sweet and Boulder. We just and it was there. right? Like it was cool, right? But they start asking the athletes, and I think all of us start asking the question, like, maybe like winning the thing isn't really the point of this. What if success in my life really isn't standing on the top step? What if success is something totally different? Right? But that's where all of culture, all of value points, right? Is like, you got to be the best, be the best, be the best. Have more, do more, get more. Get there quicker, get there more efficiently. Don't waste your life, don't waste your years. Make it happen. And so they start redefining what success is. The healthy ones start redefining what success is. And I would say that some of the happiest, best athletes are the ones that get this. They go, man, like, I want to win. Like, man, like, I want to win so bad, and I will fight for it. And yet, you know what? I know that win only lasts so long. That there's actually something else at play here. It's actually the training that I love. It's actually the process that I love. And it's the athletes that really, really get it, that fall in love with the training and the process. They go, you know what? If I end up getting from point A to point B, if I end up getting that win, if I end up getting that medal, if I end up signing with that team, great. But you know what? I'm going to enjoy every single moment in the middle of this. Because there's no other choice, right? They've lived the days where they didn't live that way, and they've felt the weight of what that felt like, right? And you all probably have lived those things too. And so my question tonight is, as I was processing this and processing the text that we're going to get into, and this may seem like oversimplified, but I think the fundamentals, right, of everything is what we go back to. Like, what is just the bottom line here? And my question is this, and I think it should penetrate your life. I ask myself this all the time because it pushes on my complex to be successful or have the next thing or achieve more, is what if productivity, what if efficiency, productivity actually isn't God's highest priority for you? What if making that one thing go away as fast as possible isn't God's highest priority for you? What if? What if there's something much, much slower that he's trying to do? What if there's something actually today, on a Monday and Wednesday afternoon, what if there's something else that he's trying to achieve? And really, I think the question beneath that question is, what is the point of this Christian life? What is God really trying to do with us? When you look at anything that you're dealing with, right? The work that you're in, the families that you have, the place that you live, the coffee shop you go to, the desires that you have, the talents that you have, the weaknesses or the vices you have, like, what is the point of this Christian life? What is God actually trying to accomplish with me? And I think this text actually speaks directly to that. And so we're actually going to skip into Hebrews 11 because I think this is one of the anchoring verses of this entire book. It says this, it says, "And without faith, it is impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him." Okay, I'm going to read that again. "And without faith, it is impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him." If I were to answer, what's the point of this Christian life? What are we even doing here on Wednesday? The point is that we become a people that are shaped and transformed into a faith-filled people that trust God with our whole heart. I mean, literally, if I could stand back at my life and go, like, literally, what were all of the things that happened? All of the crummy things and the beautiful things and the moments where I was like totally disoriented and my sort of internal life was shaken up. What if every single piece of that was actually supposed to shape me? Was supposed to transform something in me? Right? It's like the anything that comes our way is an invitation to be faithful in some new way. Right? Lisa and I have moved before, but we just moved here, and for us it was like, man, this step of faith, we've moved before, right? We've done the thing, right? We've accomplished the task, but maybe accomplishing the task isn't the point. It's actually the move to Durango. There's something about that place. There's something about that community. There's something about that job that's supposed to shape you into someone who is actually filled with more faith and more trust that God is with you and loves you and is trying to connect with you and is inviting you and is trying to disrupt your world and make you into somebody who reflects and reveals that heart of God. Like, what if that's the point of everything? Right? Christianity isn't some sort of doctrinal statement that you check off and then you get ejected out of here when you die and then you just live on forever. That's not the point. Right? And the afterlife and being in paradise is another conversation. But the whole point of what the Christian life is about is to be shaped and transformed into a faith-filled person. What if that's God's greatest priority? Boy, that would really disrupt some of our metrics. And so we're actually going to look at this text because I think this is sort of the point that the writer of Hebrews is trying to make, right? And so you can throw up the Hebrews chapter 3, right? And so I kind of finished with this passage last week, right? The fix your thoughts on Jesus, right? That Jesus reveals the heart of God, right? If you want to understand God, if you want to understand what God cares about, what God thinks about, what God values, how does God move and operate and even move in this world by the Spirit? Well, we look at the life of Jesus. We look at what Jesus is doing, right? That's what Paul says in Colossians, right? That Jesus was the visible image of the invisible God. That we get to know God personally through the person of Jesus, right? Praise God for that, right? We have someone who is fleshy and earthy and relatable and speaks and experiences all the things that we do as a human, right? That's what I talked about last week. Right? And so we're sort of continuing on in that same thing, right? But we're getting into kind of what I just described. So I'm just going to read through these first 6 verses of Hebrews chapter 3, and then we're going to kind of move on to some other stuff. But I want you to think about, as we're reading this, kind of the conversation I brought up, right? Like, what does God care about? What is God trying to do with me? It says this. It says, therefore, holy brothers and sisters, right? The family, us, who share in this heavenly calling, right, of following Jesus, fix your thoughts on Jesus, whom we acknowledge as our apostle and high priest. He was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all of God's house. Jesus actually has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of the house has greater honor than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Moses was faithful as a servant in God's house, bearing witness to what would be spoken by God in the future. But Christ is faithful as the son over God's house. This is the key verse here. And we are his house, if indeed we hold firmly to the confidence and the hope in which we glory. I actually looked up that word glory because I've never seen glory used as a verb before. In which we glory. It's actually only used 3 times in the whole Bible, that actual Greek word, and it's all in the Hebrew writer is the only guy that uses it, which I thought was kind of interesting. But really, in which we boast is what you're saying. What we like hang our hat on, what we put our stake in. And we are his house. We are God's family. We are his structure. We are his people. We are his tribe if we indeed hold firmly to our confidence and the hope in which we glory. And I think that confidence and hope that we hold on to, right, is Jesus. But that we would be shaped into Jesus' likeness. That's our hope. That's what we set our minds on, right? That's what the writer is saying. Fix your thoughts on this because this is where you're headed. That each one of you would become like Jesus, shaped like Jesus, transformed into being more like God himself, right? That we would return to this place of original intention. So I actually wrote kind of a summation of this verse. If I could write it out, I wrote this. I said, if we hold firmly to our confidence in Jesus and the hope that we have in each situation, and believe that it's for our transformation and our faith that God desires of us, we are his house. We are his family, his tribe. That God's trying to build us into something. To me, that is like the most amazing vision statement ever. That like God is trying to actually to make us into a people, right? Like the worship team and some of the other people that were here earlier, we kind of circled up and we were like talking about just like things we need to be praying for and just stuff for tonight. And we were just talking about like, man, like this place, like I hope and pray that people come into this space as a space of refuge, as a space of healing. When they walk in through these doors and they come among you, that they go, oh, man, like it's like breathing a deep breath of fresh air, right? Those same things that you get when you step out on the trailhead or get onto your bike or get up in the mountains on the skis, like the deep breath of like, oh, just peeling this back. Like that's the feeling people are supposed to get when they come into the family of God. Like, what an amazing thing to be drawn and invited into. But then the writer essentially keeps going and he gives us kind of this section of warning passages. And there's a lot of things like this in the Bible. And I'll just say, like, sometimes I read some of these warnings or maybe some of these like woes or different, sort of New Testament language or even Old Testament language is even more challenging. And I read these and I'm like, man, I don't know if like this is for me right now. And I'll just say, like, some of these things that we might talk about tonight aren't for you. You might not need to hear some of these warnings. You might be A-okay in this department. But then there's some of us who really, really need to hear some of these warnings, right? There's like, whoa, all right, let's address a few things because if we keep heading down this path, like that might not end well. And so I think that's why those are in here. Like there's some of us that need these and need them at different times in our lives. But the writer keeps going, right? And so we're going to unpack this together. I'm actually going to ask you some questions, test your Bible knowledge. Yeah, you guys are stoked for that, I'm sure. All right, here we go. So Hebrews 3, and we're actually just going to read 7 through 19, right? It's kind of like the whole chunk. So, in response to what we just talked about, this is what these warning passages, this is what the writer says. So it says, Christians, us, people here, it says, so as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you hear his voice, if you hear God's voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion during the time of testing in the wilderness, where your ancestors were tested and tried. Though for 40 years they saw what I did. That's why I was angry with that generation. And I said, their hearts are always going astray, and they have not known my ways. And so I declared an oath in my anger that they will never enter my rest or enter into this blessing. And so it says, see to it, brothers and sisters. This is the writer's encouragement. It says, see to it, my friends, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. But encourage one another daily as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We have come to share in Christ if indeed we hold our original conviction firmly to the end. As it has been said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. Right? So this is something I think we can all relate to, right? It says, I actually think I spent a lot of time dwelling on this. It says, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. And if there's something that I have experienced personally about sin or about participating in broken relationships and breaking down my relationship with God, is that there is so much we are lied to about the outcomes of those things. We are deceived by the outcomes of those decisions. The things that I think, I'm like, this isn't that big a deal. Those are the things that actually ruin me the most. And so it's saying, like, my friends, when you are in process, when you are doing life as a person, when you are trying to figure out your calling and your job, when you're trying to figure out how to parent, when you're trying to figure out your finances, when you're on this journey of doing whatever it is that you're doing, it says, see to it, my friends, brothers and sisters, that none of you have a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from God. Right? It is so easy to just give God the stiff arm in the middle of our stuff. Like when my athletes have a major crash and have a major injury or major sickness, or they're, something big happens, like one of two things typically happens. Either I get a phone call and they're going, man, how do I like be faithful in this? How do I walk through this? How do I not just waste my time being sick? I mean, I had an athlete this year that had Epstein-Barr, which is basically mono. And he called me and he's like, man, like I'm basically out for 6 months. Like this was my last kind of year. And here I am. Like, what do I do? How do I participate with God in a faithful way? And I'm like, man, that is the question you should be asking, right? Because if you're running to all the other things that we typically run to, like that is not going to serve your soul. That's not going to shape you into the person God's trying to make you to be. All right? He's trying to draw out of you a deeper sense of self and a deeper sense of identity, a deeper sense of confidence and trust that God is with you and hasn't left you and actually is going to walk with you through this. All right? Today, if you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts. Like walk with him, be with him. And then it gives the example. It says, and who are they that heard and rebelled, right? That heard God and was with God and rebelled. Were they not all those that Moses had led out in Egypt, with whom he was angry with for 40 years? Was it not those who sinned, whose bodies perished in the wilderness? And to whom did God swear that they would never enter his rest, if not to those who disobeyed? So we see So we see that they were not able to enter because of their unbelief. The writer is saying that these people did not get to experience the blessing of earnestly seeking him, of being with him, being shaped by him, that they were supposed to have, right? If you read all of the Old Testament, the Israelite journey is anything but faith, right? It actually shows a totally like messed up group of people like turning away from God. Like it's not a book of faith. It's actually a book of tragedy for the most part. I mean, ultimately a book of victory, right? But there's a lot of tragedy in the Israelite journey, right? He's like, they did not get what we're talking about here tonight, that like the whole freaking point of being liberated from the oppression of the Egyptians was that they would become a people, right? Not just like to have a title, but to be a people, to act a certain way, to live a certain way, to be peaceful people, loving people, right? That the whole world would be blessed through them. And instead, like, read the Old Testament, look what happened. They did anything but most of the time. And so I actually had a question. This is sort of, let's lighten this up here. Does anybody, we're going to test our Bible knowledge. Do you actually remember, if you've read, the Exodus story, right, of the Israelites being taken out of Egypt and walking, so like Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, their whole journey to Canaan. Do you remember because this is what the passage says. It says, and who were those that heard God and rebelled? Were they not all that Moses had led out of Egypt, right? So he's referring to the ancestors of these people, the Hebrew people. So can you remember stories or anything from, like, what were the sins of the Israelites? Like, what did they do wrong? Okay, worshipped other gods, yeah. The golden calf, that's the big one, right? That Moses went up to Mount Sinai to get the Ten Commandments, and they were like, Moses is gone. We've been here a long time. Like, what's this about? And, right? Yeah. They grumbled a lot about God's provision, right? They're like, we're hungry, we're thirsty. We want meat, right? Yeah, because they were just getting bread, right? The manna. What else? Okay. Yeah, so essentially, like, not believing that God was with them and that God would be their strength. What else? Can you think of anything else from that time? What's up?
It's about the journey.
Okay.
So much of life is the journey and how we be part of that.
Exactly. And that's what I think that's what the writer is getting at here. I actually went back and I was like, well, I actually want to see what the sins of the Israelites were. What's this person actually referencing? So I actually went back through and I'm like, there was a lot of things they really kind of didn't really trust God with, but I wrote down 5. So here's 5 that we can probably relate to. So I would say, like, their sins, their baggage, what they didn't do was that they didn't hold tight to what God had done in the past. Right? So God had they had seen God move in crazy ways in their life. And maybe you have some of those experiences like, man, this moment, like, God really showed up for me. They didn't hold on to those moments when they were walking forward, right? They didn't go, for us right now, we're going, man, we need to buy a house here. Like, we moved here. Like, I need to trust God for a house. And you know what? When we look back, we spent 12 years in Boulder in probably one of the best, cheapest, most amazing, anointed rental situations of all time in the 12 of the 14 years we were in Boulder. And I'm like, okay, I have to remember, like, God will make a way for us to buy a house because God created something insane in Boulder, which is why we were there part of the reason why we were there for so long, because we felt like God was creating this space, this, like, protected moment for us. Right? They forgot what God had done in the past. They also didn't trust where God was taking them, right? They're like, we don't even know what this place looks like. I don't even know if I want to go where God's taking me, right? That's probably some of us sometimes. We're like, I don't know if I trust God's intentions with me. Let's go back to Egypt, right? They said that a lot. Impatience, right? The golden calf, they were like not patient enough to wait on what God was doing. I wrote down, I think they didn't believe that liberation actually takes time. That there are steps of liberation, right? If you've been through a 12-step program, you realize that it's not just a moment that you all of a sudden stop drinking or stop having that addiction. There's a lot of steps in there. There's a lot of work to be done to be completely released. And I think the last one is that they thought they were alone a lot of times, which I think we believe that a lot, that you're alone. So I want to flash this map up here. So this is kind of the original, I need to wrap this up. This is kind of the original, let's see, there it is. So this red line is kind of the, I would say, like most argued route of the Israelite journey, right? So they were liberated right here, and they kind of went down, they went through the Sea of Reeds. It's the whole separation of the waters story, the first one at least. Went down to Mount Sinai. This is where the law, Moses came, right? The law. They came up here. Then they did a whole kind of 40-year wandering in the wilderness here. And then eventually went up into Canaan where God had said, hey, this is where I'm going to take you. This is where I'm going to build you into a people. And I was looking at this map, and I'm like, I really wonder why God, there are two highways here, right? This was called the King's Highway. That's a pretty straight shot right into Canaan. And then there's this other one, which I actually don't, I think it says the way of the land of the Philistines. So this was another straight shot kind of along the coast here right into Canaan. And I was looking at this, and I'm like, why did God not march the Israelites just on one of these really straight paths? Right? Like, why didn't we just go, oh, you know what? We're going to Canaan. That's where we're headed. Let's just beeline there, right? Let's get on the freeway. And it's because if you read that story, you could not, let me get the laser pointer back. The Israelites needed all of this other time to be shaped into the people that they were supposed to be. They needed every single moment of doubt and faith and doubt and faith and doubt and faith. And here where the law was given, where God says, hey, I'm going to give you some boundaries to live in because I want you to be a people. Like, you've been living under the Egyptians for a long time. You don't even know what it means to be a person. So here, I'm going to give you some guidelines to actually shape you into what it means to reflect and reveal my heart. That's what this whole stinking thing was this, right? This maybe could have been eliminated, but, If God had just taken them on the fastest route to Canaan, they would have missed the whole point of the journey. Right? There's a quote, I'm going to read this. We're wrapping up here, so stick with me. I know I'm going a little long, but this is actually a quote from a book I'm sure many of you have read, a guy named Eugene Peterson, probably one of the greatest American pastors of all time. He translated the Message Bible, so if you read the Message, that's his language. But he wrote a book called The Long Obedience in the Same Direction, Discipleship in an Instant Society. It's one of my favorite books. This is what he said in one of the passages. It says, "It is not difficult in such a world to get a person interested in the message of the gospel. It is terrifically difficult to sustain that interest. Millions of people in our culture make decisions for Christ, but there is a dreadful attrition rate. Many claim to have been born again, but the evidence for mature Christian discipleship is slim. In our kind of culture, anything, even news about God, can be sold if it's packaged freshly. But when it loses its novelty, it goes into the garbage heap. There is a great market for religious experience in our world. There is little enthusiasm for the patient acquisition of virtue. Little inclination to sign up for a long apprenticeship in what early generations of Christians called holiness." There's little enthusiasm for the patient acquisition of virtue. Little inclination to sign up for a long apprenticeship in what earlier generations of Christians called holiness. I think this is what the writer of Hebrews is saying. He's saying, don't let your heart be hardened, my friend. Life is going to come at you in all sorts of ways. Don't let your heart be hardened. I haven't left you. You're not alone. I'm trying to shape you. Let's build our relationship. Right? Nobody, I was talking to Lisa earlier this week, and like, nobody gets married for the sake of being able to say that they're married. You get married because then you have someone who you encounter love with, who unravels you, who journeys with you. Right? We're in relationship to be in relationship. That's it. There's no goal. It's just to be loved and to love. That's what the writer is saying. And so this is it. I'm going to wrap up here. It says, I think these are the responses that I think shape us. These are maybe the antithesis of what the Israelites did. This is the invitation for us. I think that we need to remember what God has done in the past in our life. Remember what God has done in the past. Look back, journal. I'm terrible at this. I'm a very forward-thinking person, so I hardly ever spend time journaling and thinking back to what God has done in my life. It's something I need to grow in. I think we need to hand over some trust or hand over some of the control and trust God for our destination. Wherever he's taking you, whatever that looks like, whatever thing that you're in going, man, where am I headed? I think we need to be a bit more patient, right? The slow acquisition of virtue, that God might be doing something much more slowly than we like. That God might open our eyes to that inner work that he's doing in us, how he's shaping us, making us, undoing us. And lastly, I think just to remember that you're not alone. Like, you are not alone, my friends. It feels that way a lot. We have been in probably the most isolating time in the last couple years. I mean, I have felt alone so much. But you are not alone. That God is with you, journeying with you, wanting your attention, jealous for your heart. I think if we get those things, we start to be shaped into his house, his people. We start actually doing this whole thing the way it's supposed to be done. I think we should, if you need to roll, I know it's 7. I know we've been trying to keep things kind of tight here, but it's spring break. So like, let's sing a worship song together. Yeah, Kyle, you want to come up here? Thanks. If you need to leave, you're always, feel free. The door's open. You can come and go as you please if you need to run or have kid stuff or have dinner plans or something. But if you want to hang out, we're just going to worship here for a few minutes. But let me just pray for us as we do that. God, I hope and I hope that we can somehow grasp the vision of what this whole thing is about. That actually you're not trying to get us to do something or win something or look a certain way or get a certain job or like have our life figured out. Actually, what you're wanting from us is to be shaped by our relationship with you. To be molded, to be transformed, right? That's what rebirth is. And so, God, I pray that we would somehow catch that vision. And maybe you would redirect us if that's not what we've been doing. We just trust you in a new way. That we would be shaped in faith in a new way. That we would take risks in new ways. We'd know your love in a deeper way. So be with us now just as we respond and worship. We trust you, God. Amen.